Welcome back to Alberta Primetime and our nightly vocal point. The Monday Money panel is in. Alberta pay raises, a little different than the rest of Canada's, and our province's best employers. Lots to talk about tonight with Karen Gingras, business coach and owner of the Management Mentor. Beth Hamilton-Keene is a director and portfolio manager at Moore Investment Management, Calgary, and Shafik Hirani, director and senior executive financial advisor with Investors Group, Calgary. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here once again.
Good evening, Jennifer.
Good evening. Thanks.
Hello.
Well, Statistics Canada's latest weekly earnings results show, on paper at least, that most Canadian workers received 4% pay increases over the last year. Albertans, nearly 7%. That's going back to January 2010, a 7% raise. The average weekly earnings here now just over $1,000. Karen, what's going on here? Why the bigger jump for Albertans?
Well, certainly our economy is picking up, and we can see that by just driving around and seeing more and more signs once again up, help wanted, help wanted, help wanted. So for sure, there's competition out there for skilled labor. I mean, and that's the key, is the skilled labor.
So it's coming on pretty quickly, this recovery of ours.
I think it is. Yeah.
Shafik, is the bigger increase for Albertans, is it an indication of the stronger employment prospects, as Karen says, and I have no doubt that's part of it. Is there something else at play here, perhaps something negative, such as the cost of living in Alberta, and so the pay has to keep up?
The pay does have to keep up a little bit to the cost of living, but the disparity between the two is significant. Alberta has a 6.7% growth. Cost of living is about 1.7. So nationally, the change was about 2.5% growth in earnings. Alberta's almost at 7%. So it's not just a cost of living detriment. Now, the one thing that may be looked upon downwards, if you look closer at the report, was firstly, there are certain sectors that are doing better, certain sectors are doing worse. Like administration is doing better, construction, retail is doing a little bit worse, and also the average hourly work time is also up by about 1%. So it's a little bit of a discrepancy, but overall, there's a lot of positive news in that report.
Is this good news or bad news, Beth, for our businesses and our economy in general? It seems a little fast.
Well, certainly it's one that needs to be watched. Wage inflation is certainly something that a lot of businesses have to manage for and be careful of and so forth. We definitely know there's a buzz around labor and making sure that you've got the right workers in place. Keep in mind, too, the context in what this 1 year is comparing. Remember, it wasn't that long ago that we were just coming out of a recession. So, of course, this 12-month period that we're measuring right now is going to look rather robust. I wouldn't say, though, that this trend will continue with the same momentum unless we really see inflation picking up, and then at that point we're really going to need those increases really to kind of continue to pay for things. Of course, the other side of it is this is something that we're watching from a business management perspective. Right. How is this going to impact the margins of those profits that we're looking at our companies that we're investing in?
Does everybody agree with that it won't keep up with this pace? Because I think there's...
Sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, no, Shafik.
The one thing is that with the 6.7% growth, it actually does look that the growth rate itself is a little bit higher. So it does look like it might sustain a little bit over at least the next 2 to 3 years. The growth rate is the fastest nationally, not just the growth, but the rate of growth in the growth. Mm-hmm. So it actually does look a little promising.
Karen, we've seen a boom before. We've seen salaries skyrocket, benefits package become important. We're going to talk more about that when we get to Alberta's best companies to work for. Are we going to see anything new this time around? If the pay has already started to increase, is there some other ingenuity that Alberta companies are going to have learned from last time and bring to the table this time that you see?
I think they're already seeing that, and especially around the number of foreign workers they had to bring in to meet their labor demands. And they learned the hard way about cultural competency. I think that's going to be really, really important to retaining their labor, especially if they want to keep their skilled labor that they've nominated for the provincial nominee program.
Which is
very important.
Cultural competency mean? I think I know what it means, but give us a better
idea.
Well,
it's understanding the difference between for example, our Canadian work environment and perhaps the work environment of someone who's coming from India or China or Mexico and the Philippines, and to really ensure that the rest of the employees understand those differences to reduce frustration between all parties.
We're not the only province that will be trying to recruit laborers, and we'll desperately want them more and more as this robust economy continues. Beth, is it even a social thing that needs to happen? Do Albertans, our communities, our culture at work, but also at home, does it need to be ready to embrace the labor that we need from anywhere in the world?
Absolutely. I think that it's just a matter of continuing to function. Important at the top was as well, has to be skilled labor. This isn't just the regular retail work that perhaps you can get as a summer student and so forth. This is skilled labor, and I think it's very important to continue to focus on what training is available, what's available not only just within the country, but out externally as well.
Okay. Well, Alberta's best employers and more of us retiring with debt. What could that cost all of us? The new ranking of Alberta's best employers is out. What makes them so good? We'll talk about that in a moment. And new figures from Statistics Canada show more than 1/3 of retired Canadians have debt. Beth, should younger taxpayers be concerned about, well, not only the plight of so many retirees quitting with debt, but also the potential fiscal cost of social welfare for all of us? Could this catch up to society in a painful way?
Well, at this point, I think it's a little premature to overreact. I would say that the statistics that have come out show that the retirees certainly have debt, but it's reasonable debt. And again, we certainly have extremes within the rankings there. But at this point, it's showing us that it's okay to have debt as long as you can manage it, as long as the cash flow is reasonable, and as long as you continue to have the assets to offset the debt. In fact, many homeowners, that is one way to get into retirement, is to begin to borrow and use that capital in their home rather than having to sell it and move into something else in the meantime.
So that strategy, because you see the ads on TV for it, it's not a bad thing?
It depends on the situation, and in many cases it's not a bad thing. I'm a little leery personally of the reverse mortgage, as it were. I'd rather have our clients in control of the amount of debt, when they can pay it off, and who owns that asset. To me, that's much more important than the reverse mortgage itself.
Karen, going back to just the figures, 1/3 of Canadians retiring with debt, what struck you about that report?
Well, the funny thing to me was that the higher our education, the greater our debt load. And that, at first it seemed backwards to me, yet I guess that means that we're more confident in our ability to repay the debt because we have a good job as a result of our higher education, and probably we're a little bit more comfortable with it as a result.
Shafik, if we think that that might be us someday, retiring with debt, is it necessarily always a bad thing? Is it a bad thing in most cases? What kind of debt would be good? What kind of debt would be bad?
Well, the bad debt is consumer debt. Even to a point, your mortgage can be considered bad debt because the interest on it's not deductible. So what you want to do is you want to pay attention to whether or not you can write off the debt. So a debt for a rental property isn't bad because I can write off that as a tax write-off against my rental income. A debt for borrowing money to invest could be considered a good thing with certain factors, depending, of course. And again, that can be considered good debt. This situation, I mean, these are people that are 55 years and older. The average median income is $42,000. The median net worth is $290,000. And for the most part, we're talking about bad debt. And so in this situation, in order to avoid it, the first thing is to address it earlier. So if you are one of those younger people, get a plan and avoid it.
Right. What about just working longer? Are Canadians in general starting to retire too soon, and on top of that, maybe spending too much? Beth, what do you think?
Well, we certainly may be a victim of those advertisements of Freedom 55 and kind of those unrealistic expectations. Again, it comes back to the big picture. It comes back to the individual case. So many families have different histories of how they got where they're getting and so forth, whether it be divorces or second marriages, losing a spouse. All of those things make every situation very different, and you really have to look at that. I do know that Freedom 55 has turned into, the joke is now Freedom 105. Right. So you've got to be a lot more realistic about what it really means to you. The other thing is, how much is enough? A lot of people think that they have to save and just live off of the income. It's about getting ready. You're saving to spend at a later point, and usually that later point is in retirement. So it's okay to save and have a good conservative plan as to how long that capital will last you over your retirement and well into your later years. It's okay to spend down that capital slowly, gradually, and carefully.
And I think one of the key things is that people actually become more financially literate. And that's more than just budgeting, but it's understanding your relationship with money. It's understanding what your values are. It's about understanding what your triggers are when you spend or save. And I think we need to do a lot more of that in Alberta and Canada and the world in general.
And if I might add, it's also about managing the expectation of your heirs, because that's an important thing as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually in Edmonton, there's the Alberta Asset Building Collaborative that teaches financial literacy in Edmonton, and it's been going for about 5 or 6 years. Literally thousands of people have gone through financial literacy education. It's fantastic.
Because once you understand it, and sometimes it's just a matter of maybe changing financial planners. Once you get a handle on it, you have that Bach moment, and suddenly everything isn't so scary.
That's right.
Let me switch topics for a moment. Alberta Venture Magazine has just come out with its annual list of best employers in Alberta, and the winners are R-Curve in the 100 employees or less category, Crescent Point Energy, a Calgary junior, I believe they're based out of Calgary, among mid-sized companies, and Service Credit Union in the large size, 750 or more employee category. First, just your thoughts about these companies. Karen, I hadn't heard of R-Curve. I've heard of the other two. What do you think of the results?
Well, I think it's an interesting opportunity for companies to brand themselves, and for people who are looking for a certain type of culture, it can help them narrow down some companies.
So just great atmosphere, great childcare,
what
great
are you
pay,
looking for
great
from
perks.
a company?
Okay.
Right, that'll help.
Shafik, do we even have, the Google or the Apple of Alberta where everybody wants to work? We don't have one of those, do we?
Oh, sure we do. I mean, I think if you take a look on the bigger scale, you take a look at, and now we're not talking about Crescent Point in our camp, but you're looking at the Royal Banks of the world and the, even some of the mid-sized companies, like I even know Beth's company was nominated some time ago. There are some ingenious ways that some employers have come up to attract and retain people, and it's more than just what are you going to pay me per hour. It's the benefits. It's do you take care of my health, my children, what kind of ingenious ways are you coming up with? And yeah, we are very competitive on a global scale in those areas.
Beth, what were your thoughts on these results?
Well, certainly I find it very inspiring to take a look at what some of these other companies are doing and some of the exciting initiatives that they're undertaking. And they're not all about dishing out the coin either. They're about finding satisfying, engaging ways to retain their employees and to really find their passions and help work with them with their passions. So that to me is very inspiring. There's a number of ways that it can happen: financial, family, flexibility. There's a number of ways to find the right cultural fit.
Even giving good, satisfactory performance feedback. It doesn't have to be always positive feedback, but as long as the feedback's satisfactory.
Let me quickly ask you this, Karen, before we're out of time. Are we in a position yet in our economy to start demanding more from employers?
I think that
start interviewing the employers rather than the other way around.
Skilled people absolutely are in a position to start negotiating now.
Some things you can ask for beyond the obvious?
Well, the obvious, some flex time. I would want to know about training opportunities for growth within the company as well.
Okay, good things to think of. Thank you all for your thoughts tonight.